Jeff Fleming, aka Mr. Kingsport. Jeff, I don't know if I can read all this. I think you made half of it up. Anybody not know Jeff? You don't know Jeff? Oh man. Okay. Jeff started out as an intern with the city of Kingsport. He rose all the way to city manager. Had very responsible jobs in between, but that he culminated his career doing that. But he didn't stop loving Kingsport and working on behalf of Kingsport. He's been a volunteer in various activities. He's very proud of his two adult children. Zach is an award-winning strength coach at Dobbins Bennett. His wife Christy takes credit and should for Caitlin. Caitlin is a periodontist in the Metro Denver area. She got all the brains, right? So Jeff is a graduate of both a bachelor's and master's from the East Tennessee State University. I've been trying to get him to pick up on the history of Kingsport. You know, Margaret Ripley Wolfe wrote this history of Kingsport, stopped at 1986. And she was really trashing us in the 70s and 80s, let me tell you. I'd like Jeff to pick it up, you know, and talk about modern Kingsport. I think he's the guy. But he's doing volunteer work, and of course he does move to Kingsport at the chamber. And he is a valuable advisor to me. He's one of those people I trust that can say, Mayor, you're screwing up at high speed, and here's why. Because he's Mr. Kingsport. So Jeff.
Hold this, Donna, you think? Okay. So this is obviously not my first time being here. In fact, when I pulled up the thumb drive, it said 2016 moved to Kingsport Kiwanis presentation on the same thumb drive. So it's hard to come up with different material for y'all. So I decided this time to answer some of the burning questions that I hear and that I get asked. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize Paula Bucao here, who is our chair this year and has agreed to stay on for next year. So thank you, Paula. So the Move to Kingsport program, let me take you back to 1999 when this all started. We had an economic summit at Meadowview. It was shortly after Eastman announced major downsizing. Most of our legacy industries were downsizing, offshoring. It was just traumatic for the community. And we even had elected officials at the time who are supposed to love Kingsport more than anybody say things like, last one out, turn out the lights, this is the big one, we'll never recover from it, things like that. So that's the context by which we began the Move to Kingsport program. We were on the precipice of a cliff that we may never be able to recover from. So here we are in 2023, still working on Move to Kingsport. So it's not a pandemic-related program. It's not a new thing. But we're starting to get, we used to get complaints that there was nothing in Kingsport. Now we're getting complaints that there's too many people in Kingsport. So, you know, if you ever wondered why people go out of politics and government, because the populace is never happy one way or the other. So the questions I wanted to address today is, why are they moving here? Why is smart growth important? Are we growing too fast? Are newcomers driving up our house prices, and are they changing our culture? This always goes exactly the opposite, I think. Come on, thing. There. So the reasons they move here, obviously we would not know unless we surveyed everybody, but just listening to people, as long as I've listened to them, what they tell me is it's none of the things that we think are important. Just putting it out there, nobody's ever asked me about a trauma center. Never have. They've never asked me about a Costco. They've never asked me about a Best Buy. They've never asked me about a Pinnacle, okay? What they're concerned about is they want to live in a place that feels like what they were familiar with at whatever point in their life they felt the most comfortable. What's big enough to have things, but small enough not to have the bad things that come along with growth. And when you look at some of those things, you know, faith, respectful. I've had newcomers that say, I can't believe y'all have a Fun Fest Christian concert. And we wouldn't be allowed to have that in Seattle. And so they're just blown away that that's still a possibility here. Respectful, pleasant, courtesy, family friendly. They can't believe we have so many events that you can go to for free that don't charge and don't revolve around alcohol all the time. But we have those too. So it's just, they're looking for things that they can put down roots. So we've kind of coined the term find new life in a small city. We're not a small town, we're not a medium-sized city, like Knoxville's considered a mid-sized city, so we said small city. which reminds me of the Jason Aldean song in A Small Town. And somebody was on social media and said, the first clue that you weren't from a small town, Jason, is you mentioned a traffic signal. Said, that's not a small town. He said, you're from Macon, Georgia. They got a Target. You're not a small town. So neither are we. We're a small city. So think smaller. How do we stack up on house prices? So part of the context of understanding all this is understanding where everybody else is. Because if you only know Kingsport and that's your whole base of reference, then you're going to be making a decision in a vacuum. So when you look at all the house prices, the median house prices, and I went out, both sides of the Blue Ridge, 5 states, and Greenville and Kingsport are the lowest in the area, lowest median house prices in the area. When you go up a little bit on the scale, you see Johnson City's at $299, but look over to the left. You've got Boone, North Carolina, the median. Now remember, the median, that's the halfway point. The median in Boone, which is in this case all of Watauga County, is $563,000. Sevierville is $470,000 is the median now in the Sevierville, Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge metro area. You see Charlottesville, Asheville, Nashville, you're in the 400s. So we're really almost half of that. So you understand why people look at us and say, you can't possibly buy a house for $260,000 here. But in fact, you really can. And if you were shopping anywhere else, you would find that house was much more. We started showing up on national publications unsolicited. This is not paid advertising. GoBankingRates.com, and it got picked up in national syndication. And Kingsport and Johnson City are named as the 15 cities that are poised for the most stable growth and likely to keep their value. So if you're waiting for house prices to come down here, that's probably not going to happen because we're already so low anyway that it's not likely to go any lower. We also started taking note of other publications talking about where people are moving and why. This was a publication from smartasset.com that again got picked up by numerous national publications. Said that where are high earners who are making more than $200,000 a year moving? And the states on the left are the bottom of the barrel. The top are on the right. And if you note, Florida, Texas, and Tennessee have no income tax. So that's certainly something that's on the minds of high earners, is how much taxes they're paying. So all politics aside and all that kind of stuff, this is just facts of where people are moving from and to. We also took note of some of the data, and Don Finley is a tremendous resource for this, about remote workers. The question always come up, well, where are these people working when they come here? Did they get a job locally? Are they working from home? And the remote workers or work from home is growing pretty astronomically across the country, but it's provided an opportunity for places like us for people to be able to work and not be dependent on a local job. My daughter-in-law just stopped being a teacher here, and she now works as an interior designer in Sevierville. So she goes to Sevierville maybe once or twice a week, but otherwise she works from home here. And it has greatly improved her salary and is loving what she's doing. But now technically she's a remote worker. And you know what she told me? She said, I don't want to move from Kingsport. I grew up in Sevier County. I don't want to live there. You can't get anywhere, And she says, Kingsport's just the right size. So she's had a lot of influence on my thinking about that as well, because she sees it from an outsider's point of view, whereas I grew up here. So we also run comparisons just to show folks sort of the relativity. So one of the things that first gets thrown out all the time is, Florida has no income tax. And so if Tennessee has no income tax, Florida has no income tax, Texas has no income tax, so they're all the same. No, they're not the same at all. So Tampa, and I talk about this with the mayor all the time, on August 7th, 2023, the Tampa mayor announced the first property tax rate hike in 30 years. This is where you have to be careful when you're reading headlines. The operative word is rate. Okay, Johnson City does this too, has done it for years. John, I don't know if you had anything to do with that or not, but that's really helpful long term. They pick a rate and stick with it. If the value of your property goes up, the rate stays the same, so that the government gets to collect more money to be able to sustain services, but that's not the way it's done in Tennessee. In Tennessee, when the value goes up, the local government has to lower the rate so that they don't get any windfall out of the reappraisal. And so then if they do adjust the tax rate, it's considered a tax hike. So it's kind of a truth and disclosure to the citizenry, but it gets very confusing to the citizens because you're going, what's the tax rate? Well, it's 207, it's 192, it's 188, Hawkins County is different than Sullivan County. It's just all, even in the same city. So if you picked one rate and stuck with it, it sure makes city management a lot easier in terms of being able to plan ahead and not have to adjust on the fly so much. In this case, Florida has multiple layers of taxing jurisdictions. Okay, so both of these houses sold for $550,000, but the taxes are 50% less. The house on the left, 4 bedrooms, 4 baths, 3,000 square feet. House on the right, house on the left, 4 bedroom, 4 baths, 3,000 square feet. Annual city property tax in Florida, $2,300. Not that different than the one 1979 in Kingsport. It's the other line that gets you. In our situation, you only have county taxes. So the county taxes on that property are $2,463. On this Tampa side, it's $6,061 because there are independent school taxes. And I just want to go on record in the editorial in the Times News that suggested that we have local school taxes. Absolutely not. We do not need that. You know, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen needs to step up and fund education, but no special body ever needs taxing authority because I see it all the time. You've heard me mention before, 43 separate taxing jurisdictions in Spartanburg County, South Carolina. So when you try to figure out how much you're going to pay, it depends on where you live in Spartanburg County and how many layers. There's a fire district tax, there's a school tax, there's a city tax, there's a county tax, and before you know it, you're not competitive anymore. They also have taxes for coastline management. There's a utility district tax that goes with this particular subdivision that was included in that number. So real quickly, it adds up. So if you're looking at Florida, you got to ask a deeper question beyond just what's the city or county property taxes, because there's other hidden fees in there. Charlotte, these two houses are similar as well. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, 2,300 square feet on the right in Kingsport. 3 bedrooms, 3 baths, 2,600 square feet on the left. But the one in Charlotte was $1.24 million. And the one in Kingsport's $530,000. When you look at the income tax, so if you were just going to put 5% down and buy that house in Charlotte, it would cost you $9,971 a month as your mortgage payment. What you would have to qualify to qualify for that would be an income of $359,000. So that $359,000, if you run it through the North Carolina income tax, that's going to be $17,000 a year in state income tax for North Carolina. Okay? Look at the other side. And when you look at that, and David, I'm talking to you now, when you look at that and you hear people say, but Tennessee doesn't have this, and Tennessee doesn't have that, and they don't have good schools, and they don't have... Tennessee is the most fiscally sound state, and it's done with no income tax. So the folks are on both sides of the aisle for a very long time have done a great job in balancing our fiscal budget for the state of Tennessee. So you need to thank them when you get a chance. Atlanta, Georgia, same thing. This house was built in 1943 in Kingsport. Atlanta built in 1920. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, 2,500 square feet in Atlanta compared to 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, 2,600 square feet in Kingsport. The house in Atlanta was sold for $1.1 million. The house in Kingsport, $450,000. That house happens to be in Fair Acres. The monthly payment would be $3,400 a month. That's probably not that different than an apartment in Atlanta. But the payment in Atlanta would be $8,800 a month, and the income tax for that required income would be $16,600, plus add your Atlanta property tax of $10,000. So again, these are southern states. We're not comparing to northern states and all that stuff. These are close comparisons. And this is the kind of data that we share with the Eastman interns as they're starting out and they're trying to make a decision where they want to live. I always tell them, if you can get a chemical engineering job in a place like Kingsport, you can use the savings to travel wherever you want to. If you want to go to Nashville for a weekend or Atlanta or a cruise or whatever, but if you go to a larger metro area and you start out with one arm or two arms tied behind your back, you're going to end up postponing having children, you're going to postpone getting married. There's all kinds of things you're going to put off because you're still trying to dig out from all the debt that just got heaped on top of you. So this is a great place to get started out in long term. Charleston. So again, these houses, Charleston, 4 bedrooms, 5 baths, 4,300 square feet. The house in Kingsport, 4 bedrooms, 5 baths, 4,200 square feet. The house in Charleston sold for $2.3 million. The house in Kingsport, $600,000. The state income tax on the salary that would be required to buy that house is $41,000 a year. So we use these to, there's kind of shocking numbers, but hopefully it gets your attention as to how special we have it here. Nashville, if you want to go the other direction and say, okay, well, if I only have $70,000 to spend and I want to buy a house, the house on the left is a fixer-upper that is half the size of the one on the left, which is new construction. So they cost pretty much the same, $250 or $260. Monthly payment $1,800, $1,900 a month. Same property tax, but you get 1,600 square feet new construction in Kingsport when you get 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 800 square feet built in 1940 in Nashville. This is a sample of some of the houses that sold in the last 7 days, and that was from August 26th. We share this on social media regularly just to let folks from outside the area understand, because if I say numbers to them, if I say $250,000 to somebody in LA, they're automatically assuming that you're at slum. You know, they don't understand the correlation of the value. So we try to just do that because a picture says, 1,000 words. And of course, you've seen this map many, many times, but just the most recent version of it is, these are the folks that have moved here in the last 12 months from outside the region. This does not count anybody from within 35 miles. So it's outside the Tri-Cities area on both sides of the state line. We did not have hardly any traction in the West Coast prior to the pandemic, but we do now. I just got a call yesterday from a lady from San Bernardino who has bought a lot in Burgonyesville, and she's wanting to build a house. She's looking for a local builder. I mean, it's all the things that, I said, how'd you pick Burgonyesville? It's on the river, it's got a beautiful view of the mountains. We were looking in Greene County and decided that we would jump across and see what was available on the other side of the mountain. They don't care. They don't care if it's in Greene County, Sullivan County, Hawkins County. What they see is East Tennessee in general, and 45 minutes is nothing. I even accidentally made the comment, well, if I recommend some builders to you, I need to make sure that they actually do work that far out. And she goes, is it that far out? And I went, no, it's not really, it's not. It's just the people from around here it is. So why is smart growth important? I tell the mayor all the time, if we get to the point where I feel like this program is undermining our city, I don't want to do it anymore. So I got to be convinced myself that this is still worth working on. So the picture on the left is hypergrowth. So that's what you would see in Cobb County, Georgia, or suburban, Dallas, Fort Worth, or Nashville. The one on the right is decline. I mean, you can pick up any newspaper, publication, YouTube, and see what's going on in San Francisco and Portland. Businesses are closing, people are leaving, they can work from home now, and I really got very interested in Portland simply because I was a planner in my profession, and so I was, Portland was the it city. It was the city that everybody aspired to. It had the most vibrant town, the quickest, it built the most downtown housing, and then all of a sudden it just turned on a dime. And so it bothers me to see what I thought was the poster child for urban renewal turn into a real drama. And so I came across a TV show where they finally brought the TV station, the chamber president, the business alliance, the downtown group, and they were just saying, look, here's the situation, folks. If you don't understand it, here's what happened in Nashville in the pandemic. Here's what happened in Portland. And they had all their peer cities. Portland lost population for the first time since the timber industry failed in 1970. You can talk about any other topic you want to talk about, whether it's politics or policy or whatever you want to talk about. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is this city that used to be a jewel is losing people, and people vote with their money and their feet. And so that's what I don't want to see us be in decline. So in the middle, what is that a picture of? That's a house on Center Street, right in the middle of town, built in 1930, that someone purchased and they restored it to better than its original value, really. And when you get to a point where investors are willing to buy old houses on major arteries like Center Street and invest the kind of money they're investing, that's a pretty sweet spot to be in my opinion, and that's what I call smart growth. Another indication that I'll use is, are we better off? What about food stamps? So food stamps, 2022 versus 2016. You see Sullivan County, Kingsport, and Bristol improved. We have fewer food stamps in 2022 than we did in 2016. And if you look above that blue line, most of them are in Northeast Tennessee. And if you look below that line, most of them are in Southwest Virginia. If you look at a similar map of where people moved, they moved to Northeast Tennessee. They did not move to Southwest Virginia. So this is attributed to newcomers moving here, is what, in my opinion, as to what lowered the percentage of food stamps. Are we growing too fast? So Sullivan County actually needs 14,519 net new households by 2040, or 726 per year, to be sustainable, okay? Now the number I showed you before, the map, that's not a net number. That was a 600 total gross number from outside the area. So that's a really small percentage, because a lot of folks are leaving. You know, people leave, people backfill them, so we're not growing that fast, but we're replacing. But if we did not have newcomers coming in, we could be in decline, and that's what we don't want, obviously. So this is looking forward. This is a 2020 to 2040 projection by the University of Tennessee Boyd Center for Business and Economic Research. So this has already factored in what's happening right now in our region. Okay, so when you talk about too many people moving here, driving up prices, 10% for 2 decades, so if you assume 5% per decade, so 10% for 2 decades is the threshold that you are really trying to get to so that you can sustain your economy. The further above that line you are, the more you're going to look like that hypergrowth situation. Look at the left of the chart. On top of what's already happened in Williamson County and Rutherford County in Middle Tennessee, they're projecting almost 50% more growth in 20 more years on top of that. Now, I'm trying to visualize what those 2 counties would look like with 50% growth in 40 more years. So, but look on the right-hand side. You see Hawkins County actually is projected to decline. Carter County is projected to decline. Greene County and Sullivan County are just barely growing. With all that's happened in Greene County and Sullivan County, they're still just barely growing, because you remember, you got deaths, births, in-migration and out-migration, and it's a combination of all that. So if you don't replace the folks that are either dying or leaving, that's where you get in trouble. Let's look back. Here's another way of looking at it, and this is available for cities. The other data was not available for cities, it was just available for counties. So in this case, we're looking at 2 years. So if you're talking 5% per decade is your desirable number, that means 0.05% per year, or 1% for 2 years. So that line that you're trying to get to is right there. So Kingsport is at 0.6%. We need to be at 1% just to be at that sweet spot. So we still have much more headroom to grow. Johnson City is right at 1%. Then you look over here at Murfreesboro, and they're at 3.1% in 2 years. 3.1% in 2 years. Are newcomers driving up house prices? I'm going to answer that over the next few slides. So if you've not been in the housing market, like I haven't been for 20 years, I was talking to somebody the other day about the good old days. And when I first got married and started working for the city, I bought my house for $38,000. My house payment was like $350 a month. When we decided to sell it, the realtor said, would you like to consider keeping the house and renting it out? And I said, who's going to pay $350 for this house? You know, I mean, that was our perspective back then, right? I mean, you can't buy a car for that now, hardly. That's not what people are facing now starting out. So when you hear young people talking about how hard they have it, they do have it hard. It's not that they're not working hard. It's not that they're no different than us. You know, it's just they're facing a tremendous uphill battle. So in 1970, this is national numbers, the average house was $15,000, rent was $108, median household income was $9,000, which was about 1.7 times median income. The minimum wage was $1.65, so buying a house back then was about 4.4 times minimum wage. Fast forward to 2023. Now again, this isn't national numbers, but it's a similar ratio for Kingsport. The median house nationwide is $416,000, $1,180 a month, $70,784 median household income, and that's 2 earners, because remember back in 1970, we had the luxury of having 1 earner. Now you got to have 2 earners to get to that household income. That's 5.9 times the median income to buy a median house. So when you hear people say, I don't know how I'm supposed to buy these houses, they're not lying. It's true. And so if they do put everything, again, I keep emphasizing this, but when they do put everything they have into trying to buy a house, they don't have any headroom left to start a family, pay for daycare, buy stuff, So that's not good for society, guys. It's not good for society. The national disparity between demand and supply. So in 2008, when the market crash happened, or the housing crash happened, we had a 13-month supply, which is twice what you would need in a healthy market. That's nationwide, okay? So what happened after that? The federal government came in, they redid all the regulations. Financial institutions come to me and say, how can I help them move to Kingsport program? I said, give some loans to build houses. Oh, I can't do that. That's, it's too risky, that sort of thing. So why is D.R. Horton doing so well? I was so curious about why are they doing so well. They have self-financing. It's like if you go to buy a car and you say, hey, you want to use the Toyota financing or do you want to use some credit union? They have an option for you. They're going to get you in a car somehow. D.R. Horton's going to do the same thing. They're going to figure out how much you make. They're going to figure out how much you can afford, and they're going to structure you a deal outside a bank to sell you a house. And so it doesn't require all those approvals. That's why people are moving into those homes, because they can get help in buying it. And so that's also one of the reasons why D.R. Horton is growing so fast all over the place. They're an affordable housing alternative for people that are wanting to get into the market that can't go through traditional financing. So now we have a 3-month supply because they've rolled back so much of the ability to finance. You can't get a loan to build a new subdivision hardly. And so that's a problem. So current homeowners are unlikely to trade in their 3% mortgage to buy a new house at 7%, because that's going to make your mortgage payment go up, in some cases, more than $1,000 a month increase over what you're already paying. So it's a golden handcuff. They choose to stay where they are. And we're not likely to see that huge boost in supply from construction anytime soon. So that's what we're up against, okay? That's the big challenge, and it's not just Kingsport, it's everywhere. The national disparity between rent and income. Well, if you can't buy a house, then you got to rent, right? So you remember a few years ago we were talking about who's going to live in all these apartments they're building in Kingsport. I faced tremendous criticism about Town Park Lofts here on Sullivan Street. It's going to turn into a low-income housing tax project because nobody's going to be able to live there. You're giving them a big incentive, and then they're not going to be able to make it. Well, we know that there's a waiting list in every apartment complex in town now. Okay, you can't, because it's difficult to buy a house. The demand for housing is a lot higher than the supply of either buying or renting. And again, that's across the country. So at the same time, the number of families residing in public housing nationwide decreased by 6% because federal policy changed to try to get people out of public housing and into privatized housing. That's what happened in Kingsport. Just like all across the country, they privatized public housing. But guess what? The demand for apartments is so high now that many of the private landlords aren't accepting vouchers anymore. So if they're not accepting vouchers, you have a voucher saying, I can pay this much and the government's going to subsidize me this much, they won't rent it to you. They'll rent it to somebody else that can pay market rate and without all the strings attached. And that has caused people to be left out. Mayor called me one day and said, hey, one of the major complexes in town, senior citizen, his rent was being increased $400. He said, is that true? And I said, probably. It was bought by an investor out of Dallas, and they decided to raise all the rents. And they're not sympathetic. If you can't pay the rent, then go find someplace else to live, And that's, how do you tell a senior citizen that, But that's the world we are in right now all over this country. And if you know anybody that's renting anyplace else, they've got the unsolicited rent escalation without, just blindly, and basically with no sympathy saying either pay it or go. And that's it's a very harsh way of looking at things. So house prices are a national crisis due to inflation, interest rates, and a lack of new home building since 2008. Kingsport is experiencing this too. We're not the only place. The main message I want you to get out of this is there is not a direct connection between newcomers coming here driving up our local housing. It's happening all over this country. So if you left here and went anywhere else, you'd be experiencing the same thing. Newcomers are, in fact, cashing out equity from higher cost areas, and then they're paying cash for a house in Kingsport. That's a situation that does put them at an uneven playing field with our locals, because they can step in and they can just buy the house, pay cash, don't have to go through all the red tape of closing. They even waive inspections and all kinds of things. But what's affordable to locals and non-locals are two different numbers. That's an important concept for you to hear. That's two different numbers. So housing costs still outpace median household income both nationally and locally. So my best assessment is that we need more housing that's affordable for the median local household income, which if you look at the median household income and you translate it into buying power, that's probably a $170,000 to $200,000 home. And that's not necessarily new construction, but that's the market that would fit most of our median household income. You go plug into to Zillow and look for something in that price range, you're not going to find anything. You zoom out, you're not going to find anything. You keep zooming out, you're probably not going to find anything. That's why people are upset, because they can't find a house at the right price. But we have got to have newcomers, because if we go down that cliff I talked about earlier, it's a point of no return. So it's not a fact of if we just stop newcomers, then there'll be enough affordable houses for all the people that already live here. Those are two mutually exclusive issues. So are newcomers changing our culture? While it may seem like a lot, 19% of newcomers are from out of state. So if you're concerned about culture change, it's a small fraction overall. So most of our newcomers come from Tennessee in general. Just as an example, I always use the chart for outside the region, because that's the way we set it up years ago, because we didn't want to count local moves because it was just shuffling the deck. But when you really take into consideration everybody that's moving to Kingsport, there's 623 total new families last year, as I told you, from outside 35 miles. But there's another 1,978 that moved from within the region here, okay? So when you add those two together for Tennessee, it's 81% Tennessee and 19% out of state. So we're not being overrun with all this "don't California my Tennessee" and all this kind of stuff. That's not an issue here. It may be a perception, but it's not really an issue here. And when you look at the ones that move from 35 miles away, even that is mostly Tennessee. And then you see the rest from that point forward. Since I've been so heavy with these numbers and these concepts, I wanted to end with something a little softer. These are taken from a Facebook post of a family that moved here from California, and they were riding back to tell all their friends in California what they experienced. And they said, "Oh my gosh, everybody says thank you. Everything's so clean, everybody waves. Everybody holds the door. We don't have to ration water. There are American flags everywhere. It's so damn green. Everybody tells you their story. There's no tornadoes and lightning bugs. We're focused on trauma centers and Costco's, and they're focused on lightning bugs." Okay? We don't even have to have sprinklers to water our lawn. My daughter just moved to Denver, and I said, "How's your yard doing?" She said, "Well, nobody told me that it dried up and if you didn't irrigate it." And I said, "Well, you don't have to mow it, I guess." But our neighbor came over with homemade brownies. We talked to our neighbors for 40 minutes before we even saw the inside of our house as they pulled in. Every one of our neighbors have offered for us to just knock on their door if we need anything, and they mean it. When we pulled into our new driveway, our multiple neighbors came out to meet us, and then there was, I didn't include it on here, but they said, we lived in California for 30 years, and I couldn't tell you anybody lived near me. Didn't meet anybody in my neighborhood. So don't ever underestimate the power of the little things. So the ultimate goal in my view is all things in moderation, as my grandmother used to say. The sweet spot for me is a community that's growing enough to sustain a vibrant economy that provides the highest possible quality of life for its citizens. And that's what we're striving to do. And so as long as we're in that zone, I want to continue working on this topic. And I'll just leave you with, if you're interested in coming to hear more about the history of Kingsport, we'll be doing that here in the next couple weeks. So, and I'm happy to take any questions if we have time.